Most people are overexposed and underdeveloped. In today's world, hyper-connected, hyper-reactive, and full of noise, we've been trained to broadcast ourselves constantly, our opinions, our plans, our goals. But here's what the science says. The more we externally signal our intentions, the less likely we are to follow through on them. A study from NYU and the University of Sheffield found that when we announce our goals publicly, especially before we've done the hard work, our brain gets a premature dopamine hit. That internal reward makes us feel as if we've already accomplished something. The result? Less follow through, less grit, more distraction. Now, pair that with another truth from neuroscience. The human brain is a limited resource system. Every time we react to drama, gossip, judgment, or meaningless comparison, we're burning the same neurochemical fuel we need for focus, growth, and deep work. This is why silence is powerful. Not silence as avoidance, but as strategy, as self-respect, as protection of energy. When you focus on yourself and deliberately stay silent, something changes. Your attention turns inward, your nervous system stabilizes, and your life becomes governed by intention, not reaction. This isn't about withdrawing from the world. It's about mastering the art of conservation, of building a stronger inner core. And neuroscience gives us the blueprint. In this talk, we're going to explore exactly why focusing on yourself and choosing silence in very specific ways actually rewires your brain for greater focus, emotional regulation, and long-term resilience. You'll learn why silence activates your brain's default mode network and how to use it for deep self-reflection and creative insight, how withholding premature communication enhances goal attainment and builds personal power, what research says about cortisol, overstimulation, and the biological cost of constant engagement, how to shift your nervous system from reactive to responsive through simple behavioral tools, why attention is the new currency and how to reclaim it, and how to become a more centered, magnetic person, not by speaking more, but by mastering when not to. Each point will be grounded in neuroscience and psychology with clear, actionable tools you can apply starting today. Because the truth is, when you stop explaining yourself to the world and start building quietly, everything changes, including how people perceive you, how you feel about yourself, and how effectively your brain operates. Let's dive in. Have you ever noticed how your most meaningful thoughts, the real insights, the deep self-awareness, tend to arise not when you're speaking, but when you're still? There's a reason for that. When we stop engaging with external input and verbal output, our brain shifts into a very different mode of operation, one that's often overlooked in modern life, yet crucial for psychological and emotional development. It's called the default mode network, or DMN. The DMN is a set of brain regions, including the medial prefrontal cortex, posterior cingulate cortex, and angular gyrus, that become active when the mind is at rest, not focused on a specific external task. In other words, it's most active during quiet moments, walking alone, lying in bed, sitting without stimulation. And contrary to what the name suggests, the default mode network isn't about zoning out, it's about zoning in. Studies using fMRI imaging, Rachel et al. 2001, Andrews, Hanna et al. 2010, have shown that this network is responsible for self-referential thinking, reflecting on the past, envisioning the future, imagining possibilities, and integrating new experiences with your identity. It's where meaning-making happens. But here's the catch. When we're constantly talking, texting, scrolling, or reacting, we suppress this system. Our attention is pulled outward, and we lose access to this deep internal processing that helps us evolve. In silence, however, deliberate, intentional silence, the DMN lights up. And this has powerful consequences for your life. When your DMN is active, you're more capable of understanding your own behavior. You recognize patterns. You start asking better questions. Why do I keep doing this? What matters to me now? Where am I actually headed? This is what makes silence productive, not in terms of output, but in terms of alignment. You begin to recalibrate your decisions, not around what's urgent or expected, but around what's meaningful. That's how people begin to change for real. And there's more. The DMN is also strongly associated with creative thinking and problem solving. A 2015 study in the journal Psychological Science showed that participants who engaged in quiet rest periods were significantly better at generating creative solutions to problems than those who were kept distracted. That means you can literally improve your brain's ability to innovate and adapt, not by forcing productivity, but by cultivating quiet space. Here's a simple protocol you can try. Daily silent reset. Take 15, 20 minutes a day with zero external input. No phone, no music, no conversation. Sit, walk, or lie down. Let your mind wander without judgment. At first, this may feel uncomfortable. That's normal. Over time, your brain learns to shift into a more self-aware, integrated state. Mindful observation. As thoughts arise, observe them. Ask, what is this thought showing me about what I value or fear? This turns passive rumination into active reflection. And that's where change begins. And remember, silence doesn't mean absence. It means presence without noise. When you step into stillness, you're not doing nothing. You're engaging the brain's most introspective and potentially transformative network. This is how focus on self begins, with less input, so the brain can finally do the real work, understanding who you are and where you want to go. There's a counterintuitive truth in psychology that many people don't realize. Talking too much about your goals can make you less likely to achieve them. We live in a culture that promotes manifesting through verbalization. Say it out loud, post it, share it, declare it. But what the science shows is more nuanced. In a classic study published in Psychological Science, Gallwitzer et al., 2009, participants who publicly announced their intentions to achieve a goal were significantly less likely to follow through compared to those who kept their goals to themselves. Why? Because stating the goal gave them a premature sense of accomplishment. The simple act of saying what they intended to do triggered a dopamine release, the same neurotransmitter responsible for pleasure and motivation. That dopamine rush makes the brain feel good, as if the work has already been done, even though it hasn't. This is known as a social reality substitution. In essence, we substitute the reward of doing the work with the reward of talking about the work. And that substitution can short-circuit follow-through. Here's what's happening neurologically. When we set a goal, the prefrontal cortex gets engaged. It starts planning, prioritizing, directing attention. But when we verbalize that goal to receive validation, our brain activates the reward system before the behavior has been executed. That premature feedback blunts future motivation. Have you ever felt fired up after sharing a new goal with someone, only to lose interest a few days later? That's not a failure of willpower. That's your brain responding to a misplaced reward. Now, this doesn't mean you should never talk about your goals, but timing and intention matter. A better strategy, practice what I call quiet commitment. Here's a simple behavioral tool. Write it, don't announce it. When you set a goal, write it down. Be specific. Define the behavior, not just the outcome. For example, I will train for 20 minutes each morning instead of I'm going to get in shape. Tell one person after you've taken action. If you feel the urge to share, do it after you've already completed the first step. This trains the brain to associate validation with follow-through, not just intention. Replace talking with tracking. Use a habit tracker or journal. It's silent, personal, and holds you accountable in a way that supports long-term consistency. This kind of disciplined silence builds something deeper than external accountability. It builds internal trust. You begin to see yourself as someone who follows through, not someone who performs ambition for others. And that has ripple effects. Over time, you'll notice you don't need to convince people of what you're working on. Your consistency will speak louder than your words ever could. If this insight is helping you, consider subscribing, because we go deep into the neuroscience of motivation, discipline, and human behavior every week. Here's the deeper point. Silence isn't just the absence of noise, it's the presence of intention. When you stop broadcasting what you're going to do and start doing it in silence, you stop outsourcing your motivation and start building from the inside out. And that's how real transformation begins. Take a moment to reflect. When was the last time your brain truly rested? Not just sleep, but waking rest. A moment without input, without talking, without reacting, without a screen in your face. For many people, that kind of stillness is rare, and it's costing them more than they realize. Chronic exposure to noise, stimulation, and social tension doesn't just drain your focus, it dysregulates your entire nervous system. One of the primary players here is cortisol, the body's main stress hormone. Cortisol is essential in short bursts. It helps us respond to threats, mobilize energy, and stay alert. But when it stays elevated due to constant notifications, arguments, pressure, or even passive overstimulation like background noise, it starts to break the system down. Here's what the research shows. A 2011 study in the Journal of Environmental Psychology found that individuals exposed to chronic noise, even at moderate levels, had significantly higher cortisol levels throughout the day and reported greater mental fatigue and emotional volatility. And it wasn't just industrial noise. Even intermittent conversations, alerts, and digital sounds contributed to this cumulative load. This aligns with the concept of allostatic load, the wear and tear on your body and brain from chronic stress. When the brain is constantly scanning, interpreting, responding, and adjusting to stimuli, it burns energy that should be going toward repair, learning, and regulation. So what's the antidote? Intentional silence. A 2006 study published in Heart, a peer-reviewed medical journal, found that just 2 minutes of silence was more effective at lowering heart rate and blood pressure than listening to relaxing music. 2 minutes. No input, just silence. And here's the neuroscience. Silence allows the parasympathetic nervous system to activate. This is the rest and digest branch of your autonomic system, the one responsible for recovery, digestion, immune function, and mental clarity. When you remove unnecessary sensory input, your amygdala, the brain's fear and threat center, becomes less reactive. Your prefrontal cortex becomes more engaged. This shift promotes emotional regulation, strategic thinking, and a greater sense of calm control. You don't need to retreat to a mountain cabin to get these effects. You just need to structure micro moments of silence into your day. Here's a simple protocol to reset your system. Silent transitions. After meetings, errands, or any task switch, take 60-90 seconds to sit silently. Breathe through your nose. Focus on the exhale. Let your nervous system recalibrate before jumping into the next thing. Noise curfew. Establish a no-in-one zone 30-60 minutes before bed. No social media, no TV, just quiet. This signals to your brain that it's safe to downshift, which improves sleep and recovery. Commute reset. If you drive or walk to work, do part of the journey without music or podcasts. Let your thoughts settle. Let your brain breathe. This isn't about being antisocial. It's about being physiologically intelligent. When you reduce unnecessary engagement, you create the conditions for your body and mind to restore. You think more clearly, you react less, you recover faster. In a world that glorifies stimulation, choosing silence is a radical act of nervous system self-respect. And that act will pay off, not just in your focus, but in your health, your mood, your resilience, and your overall capacity to lead a more centered, grounded life. Think about the last time you said something you later regretted. Chances are it didn't come from logic, it came from emotion, from that quick, heated, knee-jerk place inside you that speaks before thinking. This is where silence becomes not just a habit, but a neurological tool for mastery. What's happening in your brain in those moments is a tug of war between two systems, the limbic system and the prefrontal cortex. The limbic system, especially the amygdala, is fast, emotional, and reactive. It's designed to keep you safe by reacting to perceived threats. When you feel insulted, ignored, disrespected, or anxious, the amygdala kicks in. It floods your body with adrenaline and cortisol, preparing you to react, usually in the form of argument, defensiveness, or withdrawal. But here's the key. If you can pause, if you can create even 90 seconds of silence, you give your prefrontal cortex time to catch up. That's the part of your brain responsible for reasoning, impulse control, and long-term decision-making. Neuroscientist Jill Bolte Taylor popularized the 90-second rule based on the idea that an emotional trigger, like anger, fear, or frustration, generates a chemical response in the body that lasts about 90 seconds. After that, you're no longer in the grip of the automatic response unless you choose to keep feeding it. So if you can stay silent just for a minute and a half, you create space. And that space is everything. It's where your higher brain can step in and ask better questions. Is this really about me? What outcome do I actually want here? Will this matter tomorrow? It's not just about not lashing out. It's about elevating your identity. Each time you pause instead of react, you reinforce a neural circuit of restraint. Over time, that becomes who you are, someone who doesn't lose themselves to the moment. Here's a protocol you can apply immediately, the 90-second rule. When triggered, stay completely silent for 90 seconds. Breathe through your nose. Feel your feet on the ground. Don't explain, don't react, just be still. Let the chemistry clear before you decide what to say, or whether to say anything at all. Anchor to purpose. In conflict, ask yourself, what's my deeper goal here? To be right or to be respected? To win this moment or to protect the relationship? Silence helps you stay tethered to your values instead of pulled by emotion. Speak with strategy. If you do choose to respond, let it come from calm authority. Use fewer words. Lower your tone. Research shows that people who speak with slow, controlled rhythm are perceived as more credible and emotionally intelligent. And here's the deeper benefit. When you learn to stay silent under pressure, you stop being emotionally manipulatable. You become the one who sets the tempo of the interaction. You lead without reacting. If this insight is resonating with you, go ahead and subscribe, because learning to master your emotional circuitry is one of the most powerful ways to upgrade your life. And we're diving deep into this every week. Remember, silence isn't weakness, it's containment. And containment is strength. The person who can hold their fire is always more powerful than the one who can't stop spreading it. In the modern world, attention isn't just valuable, it's currency. What you pay attention to determines the quality of your thoughts, the direction of your actions, and ultimately the shape of your life. But here's what most people overlook. Attention is not unlimited. It's a finite cognitive resource governed by specific neural systems in your brain. The attentional control system, particularly involving the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex and the anterior cingulate cortex, is responsible for focusing, filtering, and switching between tasks. But like a muscle, this system fatigues with overuse, and modern life, with its constant notifications, noise, interruptions, and social chatter, creates a chronic drain on that system. This is called attention residue, a term coined by organizational psychologist Dr. Sophie Leroy. It refers to the mental lag that happens when your attention is fragmented. Every time you switch contexts, from checking a message to answering an email to scrolling social media, your cognitive system leaves a residue. That residue reduces your depth of focus, working memory, and decision-making capacity. Put simply, If your attention is constantly pulled outward, it never has a chance to go inward, where growth, insight, and deep learning actually happen. Now, here's where silence becomes a power move. When you choose to stay quiet, not just verbally, but mentally, you give your brain space to reallocate attention. You remove distractions, you eliminate reactive loops, you stop leaking energy into places that don't serve your development. And neurologically, silence boosts default mode network activity, the brain's introspective system. Contrary to what the name implies, the DMN isn't idle. It's engaged in self-reflection, memory consolidation, problem solving, and future planning. When you're not reacting to noise, your brain can integrate. You start to see patterns, you make connections, you start to understand what you actually need, what you actually value, and where your energy needs to go. Here's a protocol to start reclaiming your attention. The daily focus hour. Block 60 minutes each day for deep, silent work. No phone, no social tabs, no conversation. Use a timer if needed. Train your mind to stay with one thing. Weekly silence walk. Once a week, go for a 30-minute walk with no audio input. Let your mind wander. Let your internal voice emerge. You'll be surprised by the clarity that shows up when you stop consuming and start listening inward. The no response rule. Not every message requires a reply. Not every situation needs your input. Try this. For the next 24 hours, delay your response to anything that doesn't require immediate action. Watch how much mental space opens up. By guarding your attention, you protect your capacity to grow. You give your mind space to build rather than constantly repair. And you begin to experience a powerful internal shift from scattered to centered, from reactive to intentional. And here's the truth. Everything you want. Deeper focus, better health, stronger relationships, more clarity begins with attention. Attention is the gateway drug of transformation. And silence, that's how you protect the gate. We often associate confidence with how we present ourselves to others, how we speak, lead, perform, or assert. But real, lasting self-trust doesn't come from what the world sees. It comes from what you witness within yourself in private moments when no one's watching. This is where the practice of silence becomes transformational. When you stop outsourcing your validation, when you stop performing, you start tuning in to something far more reliable, your own inner signals. And this has deep roots in psychology and neuroscience. Self-trust is built on interoception, your brain's ability to sense internal bodily states, heart rate, breath, gut tension, emotional shifts. The more attuned you are to those signals, the more accurate your decisions tend to be. You're less likely to betray yourself, less likely to override your instincts just to please others, more likely to take action aligned with your values. But here's the problem. When we're constantly talking, posting, responding, explaining, we drown out those signals. Noise overwhelms interoception. Dr. Stephen Porges, who developed the polyvagal theory, explains that safety and self-regulation begin in the body. When we're silent and still, the ventral vagal system, responsible for calm, connection, and clarity, becomes dominant. This state allows us to feel safe enough to access deeper truth, to notice what feels congruent and what doesn't. In other words, silence is where alignment begins. And here's the key insight. Self-trust isn't built from keeping promises to others. It's built from keeping promises to yourself, and that requires space. Space to reflect, space to recalibrate, space to hear yourself. So let's make this practical. Here's a protocol to build more self-trust through focused silence. The evening integrity check. Every night, spend 5 minutes in silence. Ask yourself, did I honor what mattered today? No judgment, just observe. This builds inner accountability, the foundation of trust. The one-word filter. Before you speak in emotionally charged moments, silently ask yourself, is this aligned? If the answer is unclear, stay silent. This pause strengthens the connection between your emotional system and your values. Private Wins Journal. Each day, write down one thing you did for you. something no one saw or applauded. These acts of unseen discipline are what wire confidence. Think about the people you truly admire, not for their fame or charisma, but for their groundedness. What they all share is internal congruence. Their inner life matches their outer actions. And that congruence is forged in solitude, not spotlight. So when you stay silent, you're not avoiding the world, you're building the foundation to show up better in it, stronger, clearer, more self-respecting. Because the person who can sit quietly with themselves and like who they are in that silence, that's the person you can trust. And that's the person the world will begin to trust too. Let's pause and review what we've uncovered, not just as ideas, but as systems for rewiring how you move through the world. We began with a foundational truth. Silence isn't emptiness, it's information rich. It's the medium through which your nervous system recalibrates, your mind refocuses, and your self-trust is restored. Neuroscience shows us that silence activates the default mode network, the brain's mechanism for introspection, integration, and growth. We then explored 6 science-backed ideas that transform silence from a passive absence into a powerful strategy. Silence resets your brain, allowing neurochemical balance and mental clarity to emerge. Focusing on yourself is not selfish. It activates the salience network and tunes your attention inward, which is essential for emotional regulation and alignment. Not everyone deserves access to your energy. Learning to withdraw attention protects your dopamine and cognitive bandwidth. Staying silent during emotional spikes builds neural strength. By letting your prefrontal cortex override impulsive responses. Attention is your most valuable resource. And silence is how you guard it from fragmentation and depletion. Self-trust is cultivated in private, not performed in public. And silence gives you the space to listen inward and build unshakable integrity. These aren't just habits, they're neural training protocols. Each time you choose stillness over reaction, solitude over performance, reflection over noise, you are literally changing your brain's wiring. You are sculpting the very circuits that govern identity, decision-making, and long-term fulfillment. And here's the deeper reason why this matters. When you focus on yourself in silence, you become less dependent on external noise for validation. You develop an inner stability, one that doesn't get shaken by someone's tone, someone's post, someone's absence. You become someone who walks into a room already whole. So here's your challenge. Today, try just one of the tools. Maybe it's the 90-second pause when you feel triggered. Maybe it's a 5-minute integrity check before bed. Maybe it's choosing not to respond to a message that doesn't need your energy. It doesn't have to be big, but it does have to be real. Because growth doesn't begin with more doing, it begins with deeper noticing. The goal isn't to disappear, it's to become so centered that when you do speak, when you do act, it's with power, clarity, and calm authority. That's what silence gives you. Ownership over your nervous system, your focus, and your identity. If this resonated with you, if you're ready to train your mind and body to operate from intention rather than reaction, then I invite you to join this community. Click like if you found this useful. Leave a comment with the one insight you're going to apply today, and subscribe for weekly deep dives on how to optimize your brain, your emotions, and your habits with science-backed tools that actually work. This is not about perfection, it's about practice, and it starts in silence.